what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train, episode 192. Sorry for the delay there. Now, today we're working in Tane. We're dealing with all these assets. Most of them, it's just, take the ones that are open for edit, close them for edit, take the ones that are modified and faulty, and see if I can just re-download them. And so that's what I was doing for a lot of the time here. I was looking them up, seeing if they're on the download station or if they're built into 12 or something like that. And then, and then delete the assets. And then re-download them. Again, sometimes you could just revert them. That worked sometimes. But when all else fails, you've got to delete them and re-download them from the DLS, which is something I spent a lot of time doing. Also, the saving or the committing of the assets that were all open for edit, which were like several hundred, that took some serious time because the game would get hung up. But it wouldn't get hung up and crash. It would just stay there for a while and then pull itself out of whatever it was doing. Anyways, this week's question is from Dean, and I actually had it open a minute ago. Hold on. Nope, that's not it. That's not it for sure. Duplicate, and then go back a few pages. Okay. So, whoa. YouTube's freaking out on me. What's going on? Anyways, so it was, what happened in Memphis or the state of Tennessee in general? What happened to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum's fleet? Now, I did not know the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum had that many, basically had that much stuff until today when I was looking into it. I was not the one who went down there to take care of that. So, I knew the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum had Stallion 4501, and I knew they had the Huasi Loop as part of their run because I actually ran over it once in the Zombie Train. The one time I paid a visit to Knoxville and then detonated a bridge and didn't come back. That is why I didn't go down there. And it's sort of like some places I wouldn't mind going back to. Some places I really don't want to go back to. Knoxville is kind of one of them. I had a fun time, but my arm got cut up just because we plowed through a semi. This is something that will be in a book sooner or later, so I'm not going to go through this in detail. I'd just burn all the time doing that anyways. So, anyways, this, is this new permanent facility, blah, blah, blah. They are in Chattanooga, yeah? Let me see. Yeah, they're in Chattanooga. So, Knoxville has a couple of little things as well, but I don't think I ever went to Chattanooga then. Knoxville had some stuff. I don't remember what they had, but they had something. They had like a rare museum or two. Anyways, Chattanooga. And Chattanooga, I don't think got as far as Nashville did, to be completely honest, in terms of the zombie survival. Or, sorry, Knoxville. They didn't get as far as Knoxville. Nashville, they're all built on these bends of rivers, and despite everything, those aren't hugely defensible. The only thing I know in terms of survivors in Nashville is there was a contingent sort of, there's probably a name for this neighborhood. It's just where the river wraps around, and there's Jeffers Street that comes across almost all the way. And I know that north of Jeffers Street, that was like the little enclave there. I didn't ever go to Nashville, and part of that was because all the railroad tracks were south of Jeffers Street. Almost completely. So, there was, if I recall correctly, no, I actually dealt with some people going to that area. Let me see if I can dredge that up. So, the few times I was down in that area, I certainly had a hell of a time. I went through Tennessee on the way to Atlanta, yeah, that's right, because it was the center of operations for NOAA at one point in time, and they were sort of our eye in the sky. But even, even worse than Nashville, Memphis, out on the edge of the Great Plains, or even pretty far in there. I wouldn't, Nashville isn't a particularly hilly town, so they were in danger of that anyways. They managed to sort of hold their own a little bit because they had some sort of large natural barriers in almost all directions except for north, and they had their smaller natural barrier to the north. So, as far as I know, there were probably a couple hundred survivors just hanging out there. All sorts of little communities, though, managed to hold on down to the south. You'd go through 10, and then you'd find one where you'd have survivors, which was impressive. And I think part of the reason was it's just so, it's easier to survive out there than it is, say, towards the Rockies or in the Northeast where you have the harsh winters and stuff like that. It's a much more hospitable environment for just survival. And that, I have no doubt, led to a lot of people living a little longer. Also, just for probably a number of other reasons. But the, you had a lot of these little communities. And they would be very, very tight-knit as well. And obviously the post-apocalyptic communities didn't get... I'm just bad at words today. Sorry. Okay, so the post-apocalyptic communities didn't have an awful lot of people in them. So you would end up with all of these small groups of, sub 100 people, and everyone would know everyone absolutely. There wasn't any question there. And the downside of that was you almost never knew the next town over. You didn't even know if there was a next town over. Because they hardly had any way to communicate. Some of them had radio, but most of them didn't have electricity at all, to speak of. There's a lot of hydroelectric power plants down in that area, and some of them were still serviced or serviceable, but that was never a guarantee. And that would be sometimes what I would hope for while I was there, but that only came true a couple of times. I never, I helped with that on a handful of occasions. I helped get a dam up and running at least once, and we sort of sprung for those once the Zombie Train Incorporated kicked back in, because it was like, these are really good, easy sources of power. They're already there. You don't have to mine anything or ship anything. They're just there. And that made things, as I said, much easier for us on the front of getting power back to these areas. Which was important, just, for basic necessities, for heat, and, obviously it doesn't get that cold, but heat's important. Heat and light and, radio and cooking and stuff like that. You can cook other ways, you can do this, that, the other, but it's like, we already have all these amenities that have been hanging around since the Great Panic. Why don't, we want the ability to make use of them. And so for being as spread out as the communities were in Tennessee and North Carolina and South Carolina and Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, all those areas, especially those, the areas of those that are closer to Appalachia, it was fairly easy to get power back when there was the infrastructure already in place. Now, I'm looking at a book that's in progress and that that I haven't finished yet. And it was when I went through here, and I'm trying to remember which town was being actively worked on. Well, there was Charlottesville, but that's because there was an airport there and we needed to pick stuff up there. So, we were dropping some people off, and they were out there to... Okay, it was Lewisburg. Where is Lewisburg? And that was probably, of all places, that was probably one of the more thriving settlements that survived. And it wasn't something that I got to, at least not for a very, very long time. When they needed it, we weren't... When they needed us, we weren't really available, but we were able to get them what they needed, sort of at a distance. And then we came around later, after the Zombie Train Incorporated. And Lewisburg sort of evolved into a forward base for assaulting the plains. Even though it wasn't a particularly central location, it was just south of Nashville, and it allowed us to have sort of a safe haven that we didn't have to worry about. Like I've said, the Great Plains were death zones, with many, many, many zombies wandering in packs of thousands, and if not millions. And it wasn't something that I was going to tango with. It wasn't something that you wanted to tango with. And that's why a lot of the cities, especially in Western Tennessee, got wiped off the map fairly quickly. In Eastern Tennessee, you get more towards Appalachia. Knoxville had a bad time. They made an attempt at making a walled city, and they failed. They weren't able to get all of their flanks secure, and then they were assaulted pretty badly. Chattanooga, as far as I know, didn't even have a chance. And that is unfortunate, obviously, because you could have had people running out of there with steam engines. But that possibly was one of the heaviest, like, zombies per square mile cities in Tennessee. It probably was, to be completely honest, except for something, some really tiny outlier. But the fact of the matter is, it ended up being like a congregation point, and they weren't able to join the groups that were on the plains. So you ended up with a city that was just chock full, and that's what I do recall. The teams that went there to get stuff out of the Railroad Museum had an absolute hell of a time. It was like one engineer and maybe 24, operators, just people with guns to hold them off while the engineers and other mechanical workers sort of saw to getting everything that was necessary with the engines for them ready to leave. And I'm sort of stumbling over words here still. But my point is that was really bad, and I'm glad I wasn't there for it, because as entertaining as it might have been, it's not something I was going to look forward to. So no. There, take me there. Yeah. It's not even that the area that the museum is in is, like, central. The problem with it is that as soon as you start attracting attention, you don't stop. Because you're up there and you're working, and they just keep coming because because of gunshots, because of zombies' moans. It's like you took that entire the upshot of which was when you drew all of them towards the museum and towards, like, Tyner and Harrison, you were able to get at the city a little bit better. And we did have a team that was ready to sort of go in and pick through all the cars in the yard and stuff like that. But as far as I know, that either didn't happen or did not happen to a particularly potent extent, like a particularly large extent for the majority of that yard, because I know that for a while they would run in and they'd grab a string of cars and they'd bring them out to some town up to the north where they had a passing siding, and they'd pick through them, sort them aside, and then go back for the next string and just dump the cars they didn't need. And they did that for a while. But yeah, all things considered, you had a lot of good and a lot of bad in a state like Tennessee. At least we were able to get some pretty decent stuff out of it. Maybe I can talk more at length about that, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. We've got 450 more assets to fix in Tate, so it's probably going to be a little bit more of the same. And yeah, maybe I'll get that roster. Train Man out.